y'all, it's Heel Heat time.
Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and this is an episode of How I Would Have Booked. On this episode, we're going to cover Starrcade 1997. Now this comes to us as a recommendation from our friend Manic Scarecrow. And what I'm going to do is I took the card, I looked it over, and I made a couple changes. But instead of booking the build up to this in one specific angle or breaking down every single angle, I'm just going to book this specific pay-per-view. I made a couple adjustments, a couple changes in matches, a couple changes in results to where I think it would have been a better show and would have been the payoff that we were expecting. Now let's jump right into it. A match that I didn't change at all. The first match of the night, Eddie Guerrero versus Dean Malenko for the Cruiserweight Championship. Eddie Guerrero being the Cruiserweight Champion at the time. I changed this a bit. The only thing I would change, I'd have Dean Malenko win, and you're going to see why later. I'd have Dean take the Cruiserweight Championship, have him go on to be the guy in that division for a while, have Eddie... I'm gonna squash. I'm gonna hold down the reason what I'm doing with Eddie for a little bit, but as you'll see, I have something cool in mind for Eddie that happens later in the show. Next up, we had a six-man match. Originally, it was Scott Norton, Vincent, and Randy Macho Man Savage versus Ray Traylor and the Steiner Brothers. A couple of things made me change this. First off, there was a announced match that was supposed to be Kevin Nash versus the Giant. Well, Kevin Nash, the day before, a couple days before, had what he thought was a heart attack, which was really just a really bad case of indigestion mixed with some stress, so he had a false alarm. However, he couldn't make the show. Because of that, now we have the Giant available. So I substitute the Giant in where Ray Traylor was. I make the Giant and the Steiners against the NWO team of Scott Norton, Randy Savage, and instead of Vincent to add more star power into this match, I put Scott Hall in there. And it gives me, in my opinion, you have a little bit more upper guys, two guys that weren't wrestling on the card, Scott Hall and the Giant, who were two, higher level, higher profile guys that absolutely should have been on the card somewhere. I know in the original Scott Hall helped Bischoff a bit, but he didn't actually have a match. So we'll put him in here. And on this match, I had the NWO team win because I want to give them a little bit of a false sense of security that the NWO is fine, that they're going to roll and they're going to maybe Hogan's going to be able to keep the world championship. So we started off with this NWO squad winning. I have a little bit of dissension in the rank of the Steiners because eventually we're going to see Scott Steiner break off and become Big Papa Pump. I do it in a way where Scott Hall pins Rick Steiner, so it's not a guy. Rick Steiner can take the pin and the Steiner Brothers team is going to be just as big and just as good. That way you don't necessarily have the Giant eating the pin. And you also give Scott Hall a win on the pay-per-view. So to me, that's what I would do here. Now the next match, and I kept the order of the matches pretty similar to what it was as well, is Goldberg versus Steve Mongo McMichael in what was to the point Goldberg's biggest feud. The match itself was an abomination on the show. I'm keeping the match. I'm going to book it a little differently. Instead of it being a, almost an even contest, I'm going to have it be more of a 70-30, where Goldberg is dominating 70% of the match to Mongo's 30%. I still think you're at the point where you have to have Goldberg steamrolling, and him steamrolling a guy with Mongo's credibility at the time, a former U.S. champion, former horseman, is only going to build him. And that's what I would do. I wouldn't make it as competitive as the original match was. I'd make Goldberg more dominant, which may have been the plan, and it may have got lost in translation in the ring. But that's what I would do. That way we could have Goldberg moving forward. Of course, we're going to want to build him to be one of the huge stars, as we know he would eventually become. And this is one of the building blocks to do that. Now, next up, we have a match that on the original card was scheduled to be Raven versus Chris Benoit. Raven pulls his Raven's rules out of the hat and puts Saturn in the match, and Saturn beats Benoit. I'm going to change that. In my version, we already kind of have a match that we didn't deliver on for the fans in the Giant versus Kevin Nash, which is a big-time match that we don't deliver. So I'm going to keep Raven in this match versus Chris Benoit. And I'm going to have the flock helping Raven, like they would. However, I'm going to have Chris Benoit overcome the odds, because I think Chris Benoit, again, is someone I can look to the future as someone being a guy going forward I could push into a higher profile. It doesn't hurt Raven. Wins and losses never hurt Raven. His character never depended on the win or loss, which was really cool. I love to have seen him be more high. He'd be more high profile in WCW. But for the sake of this show, and the sake of the storylines that we're going to have going forward, I'm going to have Benoit win so we can split the feud with him and Raven. Raven can go somewhere else with his feuds. And I'll mention that when I get there. And Benoit can do his thing. Next up, we have Buff Bagwell versus Lex Luger. I see no reason to change this match. I see no reason to change the outcome. Buff Bagwell winning. Again, we have the NWO wheels turning. It looks like they're building momentum. It looks like maybe, just maybe, NWO is going to be the dominant force going forward. Still, after that, our next match I'm going to keep pretty similar. DDP, Diamond Dallas Page versus Kurt Hennig for the U.S. title. I still have DDP win this match, and I still have it pretty much the same as it went down. I thought it was actually one of the better matches on the card. This is probably, when I look back, the match that I liked the most on this card in real life. And at the end of the match, with Hennig and Rick Rude walking away, we start to see a little bit of the chinks in the NWO armor. They've got their first loss of the night. I have Eddie Guerrero come out. Either come out through one of the aisleways and jump DDP from behind. So now we have DDP moving on from Kurt Hennig feud into a feud going forward with Eddie Guerrero, setting up for maybe Super Brawl, where Eddie Guerrero is going to challenge for the U.S. title, raising his profile, all while giving DDP another great wrestler to work with, which we've seen. When DDP has a great wrestler to work with, he put on some fantastic matches and some of the best matches in WCW history. So I give him another great wrestler and another guy that both of them can help build each other, and a guy that we want to, again, elevate going forward. Much like Bagwell, much like Benoit, we want to keep him on a positive trajectory going forward. Goldberg, we want to keep these guys as the future of what we're going to do. Now, the next match I'm going to keep the same too, because the stipulations are what made this match what it was. And that's Larry Zbyszko versus Eric Bischoff for the control of Monday Nitro. I'm going to keep Bret Hart as the guest referee, because I don't know why Bret Hart wasn't used as a wrestler on this show, but it's going to fit my story like it was supposed to fit their story. So I'm going to keep him as a licensed referee for the show, and I'm going to have, Scott Hall tries to interfere, Bret Hart stops him, Savage comes out, tries to interfere. Bret Hart stops him. Norton, Hennig. Bret Hart basically runs the NWO off. Zbyszko picks up the win over Bischoff, keeping control of Nitro in the hands of WCW, with Bret Hart being the referee of record, so he's officially a referee on the show. And that's the reason I keep that the way it is. And the main event of the night, probably the most hyped up match in the history of wrestling, one of the most anticipated wrestling matches that I can remember, other than Andre and Hogan, Hogan and Warrior, Hogan and Savage, Austin and The Rock. This is one of those matches that every wrestling fan wanted to see. Whether you were a WWF fan at the time, an ECW fan, a WCW fan, everybody wanted to see what was going to happen when Sting finally got in the ring with Hogan. And I would have the match, I'd keep it going, I'd keep it pretty clean for a WCW match. I'd have Sting taking advantage, I'd have Sting being, the dominant factor. NWO tries to run down. We have guys like the Giant, the Steiners, Bret Hart come out. And then we throw in some other guys like Benoit and DDP as a front to take the NWO out of there. However, Scott Hall gets through. Scott Hall gets through. You see him in the ring. He goes to attack and help Hogan attack Sting, which Bret Hart sees. He slides in the ring, nullifies Scott Hall. All this time the referee's down. Instead of doing the quick count, I have the referee bump. The referee's down, so he nullifies Hall, gets Hall out of the ring. Sting hits the Scorpion Death Drop on Hogan, puts Hogan in the Scorpion Death Lock. Bret Hart's down looking at Hogan, says that Hogan says ring the bell, Hogan's tapped. You have a brand new World Heavyweight Champion, Sting. Bret Hart holds his hand up high. The two shake hands and hug. All the WCW guys that were fighting off the NWO come to the ring. They put Sting on their shoulders. We go off the air with Sting getting a pretty much clean win over Hulk Hogan, which should have been what it was initially. And that's how it would go going forward. And then from there, I would build, like I said, I'm building Benoit up. I'm building Buff Bagwell to a more prominent role. DDP, Eddie Guerrero. And what I said about Raven, splitting him from Benoit, is I'm going to make this the catalyst. Hogan losing is going to be the catalyst to break up the NWO. However, Sting's going to need a new enemy, a new heel to go against, and that heel is going to be Raven and the Flock, where instead of the NWO, we see Raven doing what he did, which is a little bit different psychology, a little bit different attack. And Sting will have to deal with that going forward to the point where we'll eventually get a money match of Sting versus Raven, which is what I got going forward, bringing Raven into the main event. All the while you have other guys, other of the younger talent, other of the newer talent in WCW, all coming up the same way as well. That's what I would do with this specific card. It's probably one of the most covered events in wrestling. I mean, I've covered it several times. I did it came from the network episode about it. I've mentioned it on my reasons why WCW failed. I've mentioned it several times as the bad decision of the match with Hogan and Sting. And as you can see, the card itself wasn't terrible. A couple little tweaks, and I think it made it a much better card, and I think it was a much better product going forward. Let me know what you think. Do you think I booked this card wrong? Do you think I stayed too close to what they did? Do you think maybe I should have switched it up a little more? Do you like what they actually did more than what I changed? Let me know what you think. Hit me up in the comments down here. Hit like and share. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the page. Once again, thank you to Manic Scarecrow, our friend, for recommending this. It was a lot of fun taking this from a different angle than the way I usually do these, which is to take one person and book them for a certain period. But it was a lot of fun to book one card. So I hope you like that I changed the way I do these a bit for this. But I think it fit more, and I could fit more stuff in here and explain a little bit where I was going to go after this. So thank you again. Thank you everybody for watching. My name is George Coles, and this has been an episode of How I Would Have Booked.